Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Anthony Rendon. He is a member of the California State Assembly, and I want to speak with you about water. It is an issue that continues to perplex both Northern and Southern Californians. In 2009, it seemed as if we had a compromise. Democrats and Republicans got together, and we were able to hammer out a water bond, about $11 billion. Yet it was not put on the ballot in 2010, 2012. What about 2014?
We're trying. The bond, as you mentioned, when it was first negotiated, was at $11.14 billion. A lot of folks felt that that was too big, and they thought it wouldn't get past the voters, so it was moved off the ballot twice. So we've reorganized in the Assembly. We have a water working group with folks from throughout the state, Assembly members from throughout the state. We're working on it. The Senate, they're working on it as well.
But I understand the notion that maybe it's too big, and there's this suggestion that somehow there's, I don't know, maybe $2 billion of pork,
right,
whatever that means. That being said, sir, it was part of a bona fide compromise. I know we're 4 years out, and some of the members that were part of that compromise are no longer in the legislature. But it was not easy, and they really worked hard to get that compromise done. Is it worth trying to blow open this grand compromise at this stage in the game?
I think it is. It is from the perspective of, obviously there are significant water needs throughout the state with respect to conveyance, with respect to water quality, with respect to virtually every aspect of the hydrologic cycle. There are water needs. With respect to the compromise that existed, you're right. There were a lot of complaints about the amount of pork that was involved in that compromise. The Water Working Group developed principles for the new water bond. And it's important to point out that we're starting from the ground up. But
that's the point. I mean, why? Really hard work was put into this. And you know, one person's pork is another person's job creator.
Right.
And at the same time, that's part of compromise. I mean, it may be ugly, but pork sells,
right,
metaphorically and literally. So why start from the ground up?
It's a good question. Like you said, most of those folks aren't there anymore. Most of the folks aren't there anymore in the Assembly. Governor Schwarzenegger is not on the second floor anymore.
Yes, no, he's not.
He's not anymore.
Right.
So it's a brand new day. And I think for our perspective, we're trying to work on a water bond that's going to meet California's water needs in the future.
So the water bond would be drafted by the legislature and then put on the ballot.
Exactly.
When it's drafted by the legislature, do you need 50% plus one to get it on the ballot, or 2/3?
You need 2/3 in both the Assembly and the Senate.
Okay, so I think the Democrats have 2/3 right now. I'm not sure. It's a little complicated.
Right.
I guess at some point you will again soon, before 2014?
We're likely to.
Okay.
We don't have 2/3 now because there are a couple of empty seats.
Right.
So we don't have 2/3, so we will need bipartisan support. If the vote were taken today, we would need bipartisan support.
But let's say, for argument's sake, that you had 2/3. I have talked to Republican members, and they've said that the Democrats have attempted to be inviting, and they don't feel as if they've been completely excluded, per se. So will you still reach out to Republicans on these issues, or are you going to try to keep this within the Democratic Party?
No, absolutely. We're absolutely reaching out to Republicans. It's water is largely a nonpartisan issue. There are political aspects of it.
It's geographic more than partisan.
For sure, absolutely. I think a lot of the big cleavages and a lot of the big fights are between North and South, between urban and ag, between Delta folks and non-Delta folks.
Right.
So I think those are the real sticking points.
So explain what you hope to have included in the water bond. And in the background, I'm going to want to ask you about the Bay Delta, because that's another issue that's percolating, if I can use that metaphor.
Right. Well, we are, as I said, right now we've developed principles.
Right.
We've developed principles, and then the next step that we're going to take is to develop the actual general categories. Those categories are likely to include items relating to water quality, items relating to water conveyance, items relating to groundwater cleanup, those types of things.
So we are not saying the water bond addressed the Bay Delta. That is a completely different beast, and I think in a lot of ways somewhat confusing to people who are trying to follow the whole debate behind water. Explain why the Bay Delta is not part of the water bond discussion.
Well, that's not exactly true.
See, I'm confused.
Right.
See?
Not exactly true. To the extent that the water bond will cover ecosystem restoration, to the extent that the water bond will cover conveyance, it may impact the Bay Delta. It may impact the Bay Delta. But it's certainly not sort of a comprehensive bond. It's not a bond geared towards comprehensively impacting the Delta.
So what's happening on the Delta front? Recently I spoke with John Laird, who is the Secretary of Natural Resources, and it's clear that the executive branch is moving forward on a Bay Delta conservation plan that I believe would not go to the voters. It would go to the ratepayers.
Right.
I guess that's all the same, but it's a separate track.
Exactly. Right.
Why is that?
Yeah, the governor believes he has executive authority to implement certain programs and policies, and that's one of those things that he wants to do.
So his strategy is to turn to the ratepayers to restore the Bay Delta. Couldn't we do the same for what you've described, the conveyances, the groundwater?
We could, and that's been proposed in the past. It was proposed a couple of years ago in the state senate, and it was a bit difficult to get through. Folks feel that a bond would be something that would have categories that were more general that could be applied throughout the state.
So the bond goes to the voters, presumably, needs 50% plus one?
Yes.
So are we going to see it on the ballot in 2014? It really is remarkable that the bond has been pushed twice.
In the Assembly, I'm the chair of Water Parks and Wildlife, and I'm heading up the water bond working group in the Assembly. We're intent on getting it on the ballot. The Senate has their own folks working on it. It's Senators Pavley and Senators Wolk are working on their side. I've met with both of them. They seem to be pushing forward. The governor will be involved as well. So I know on our end, we're certainly trying to get it on the ballot.
But let's talk the politics of it, because 2014 is an off year, and presumably the electorate in off years is more conservative, I guess one could argue. So are you well advised to put the water bond on the ballot in a non-presidential year where turnout is higher and California voters tend to be more generous, think Prop 30 in 2012?
It's a good question, and I think that's why sort of massaging the total amount is very important. A lot of folks felt that the $11.14 billion was just too large. There have been polls by PPIC, for example, which said a $5 to $7 billion bond would be something that voters might be willing to attack. For me, it's not about the total size of the bond as much as it's about the actual accomplishments that we're going to achieve.
And it's critical. I mean, are we really in a place where we need to do something quickly?
Absolutely.
There's no question in your mind.
Absolutely. For a number of reasons, water quality, conveyance, all those issues, we have had a long-standing disputes, long-standing problems with water in the state. And it's something that needs to be addressed now.
So let's talk about you. You've been in the Assembly for, 6 months or so. How's it going? I mean, it's a completely different position. You would run a Head Start program, is that right?
Right.
And so for some reason, some synapse snapped and you decided to run for office.
Right.
But talk to us about it. Give us a sense of how is it? What's it like?
I love it. It's fun. It's intellectually stimulating. I've learned so much. The diversity of what we do in this state. One day you'll have a meeting on high-tech industry. The next day you'll have a meeting on agricultural issues. The diversity of the issues that we handle in the state, the diversity of the issues that come to my office are just incredible.
That being
said, it's a great job.
The diversity of issues is intellectually stimulating, but can be overwhelming. I mean, how do you, you didn't work in water policy before. If it was education policy, how do you get a handle on all these issues?
Great staff matters. The Assembly itself as an institution there's a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge there, so it's a challenge, but we're getting there.
Okay, his name is Anthony Rendon. He is a member of the California State Assembly. When we come back, we are going to be speaking with Anthony Duarte. He is a member of the Hacienda La-Puente School Board. We'll be talking about the local control funding formula, common control. Mr. Rendon, thanks for joining us. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Anthony Duarte, he is the clerk of the Hacienda La-Puente School Board, a trustee. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Brad.
I want to speak with you about what we know as the Local Control Funding Formula, LCFF, which really changes the way education is funded in our state in a way we haven't seen in decades. I mean, it's a revolution in education funding. At least I think it is. Do you as well?
No, it is. It is. And Hacienda La-Puente is a winner from LCCF. So, you know, we are seeing an increase in our funding of almost $3.1 million.
And let's talk about the winners and losers with LCFF. Originally, when the governor proposed the plan, we weren't going to see a return of K-12 funding back to pre-recession levels. Through legislative compromise, we are seeing that as the base grant. Mm-hmm. How important do you think that is and was?
It was very important. I mean, I don't think there were any losers in the governor's proposal.
With the change
that was made,
right.
Yeah, every district has seen an increase in their level funding, and by 2021, we're hoped to be back above the recession.
Let me ask you though about the way LCFF is playing out. Mm-hmm. There are two portions of it. The first portion is if a school district educates a single student, let's say, and that student is either a foster child, is economically disadvantaged, or is an English language learner, there'll be a 20% bump above the base grant. And I think a lot of folks understand that makes sense. The money follows the child. The second part, though, is known as a concentration grant. And under that formula, if a school district educates more than 55% in those three categories, there'll be another 50% bump.
Correct.
And that could be a 70% bump.
Yeah.
Wow.
At some of At some of our schools, our English language learners are anywhere from 72% to 57%. So that's a huge range. So, you know, Hacienda La-Puente is definitely going to benefit from that. And our free and reduced lunch population, it's a little over 86% of our student population.
I guess my question is, I think that if you ask an average person, they would say, no question, English language learners, more resources are necessary. Economic disadvantage, okay, we'll put that in there. But is it a 70% difference? You see what I'm saying? That's where there seems to be some question.
It wasn't a 70% difference. Like we adopted our budget already, and it was $143 million, and we're looking to revise our budget, and we're looking at about $147 million.
But I guess what I'm trying to get at is, and because this question is somewhat amorphous, but you will see, you know, that 70% bump. And for some people, it just feels as if, wow, I mean, does a child who fits one of those categories really need 70% more funding? I mean, couldn't we have just given 50% more funding or 30% more funding? 70 is a big number.
It is, but we want to make sure that they have the resources to succeed. You know, we make sure that they have the programs that are going to make them successful and get them out, you know, make them proficient. Right. And so we want to make sure we have the resources to get the extra instruction, to get the teachers on special assignment, to get the training for the teachers, to make sure that they're properly trained to instruct these students.
Speaking of training, as we know, in a mere under 2 years, California will be one of 45 states that adopts what's known as Common Core standards.
Yes.
This is another revolution in education. Talk to us about what Hacienda La-Puente is doing as an example of one district to prepare for Common Core.
Yeah, you know, we're gearing up for Common Core. We have a steering committee made up of teachers, principals, administrators, and they're looking at, you know, how are we going to roll out some professional development for our teachers? You know, how are we going to get instructional material? How are we going to bridge the gap from what we're doing already to meeting those Common Core standards?
And let's talk about bridging the gap, because that to me is kind of the most interesting element of this. So I have two daughters going into 6th grade, going into 4th grade. If they were at an institution that was adopting Common Core, as an example, in a couple years, they're kind of right in that middle range. So at that point, you know, whatever, 8th and 6th grade, it's a very different way of teaching.
It is.
And so how do you deal with those students that are kind of already in the system, but in the middle of the system? You know, for K-1, 2, those students will figure it out. For 10th, 11th, 12th, probably too late. But for those students kind of, 4th through 8th, how do you get them to completely change how they think and how they'll be educated.
Yeah, no, I'm in your same shoes. I'm the father of an 8th grader.
Oh, so
and so he's right in those middle years. And what we're doing is we're taking, instruction that we're already using. We're taking materials we're already using, and we're saying, okay, what do we need to bring on board? What materials do we need to bring? What instruction, professional development we need to bring to use what we have to make it fit with the Common Core standards, and really focus on, one of the biggest focuses is on reading. Reading on all levels, whether it's math, whether it's science, whether it's history, language arts.
But it's interesting you mention history, science. In a lot of ways, California and other states have been so singularly focused on English and math, but Common Core expands beyond that. I mean, there will be, for example, to the extent there is standardized testing, it will not just look at English and math. It will look at other areas. What's also interesting about Common Core is, you and I, we're used to the bubbleized standardized tests. With Common Core, that's not going to be. You still see the bubbles, but you'll have to defend which bubble you color in.
Yeah. And that's what's so exciting about Common Core rolling out. It's no longer, teach the test. It's making our students really critically think. And that's what's been lacking, with No Child Left Behind. And now coming to the Common Core standards is we're really going to challenge our students, not only like, well, that's the answer, well, why is that the answer?
Right, that's the key. It's digging deeper. But let's back up for a second. As we know, in a lot of school districts, like you said, high populations of English language learners. Hacienda, La-Puente, very high.
We are very high, yes.
So how does Common Core interplay with local control funding formula, trying to give, I don't want to say preferences, but treat those English language learners in a way that will allow them to advance?
Well,
Do we know?
We have the, we're implementing with the local control funding now. We have some resources now to help bring the English language learners, in line with Common Core. So at each school site we have a facilitator, and not only do we have a facilitator, at some of the high school sites we have 2 to 3 facilitators to help implement Common Core. But we also have teachers on special assignment to work with the English language learners, to work with our teachers in specialized groups to make sure that they're ready come 2014-15, that we're rolling out, and it's going to be seamless.
And I got to also ask you about the English language learner element, because I think for so many of us, we think English language learners, Spanish speakers. Yes, a significant portion are Spanish speakers. But Hacienda, La-Puente, you have a significant Asian population.
We have, a lot of Mandarin Cantonese speakers. We have a large population of Korean speakers.
And so how do you handle the multilingual challenges under the local control funding formula, which really is looking towards bringing all those different populations to English proficiency? It's remarkable to me.
Yeah, and it comes down to really giving good professional development to our teachers, making sure that they are ready to handle a diverse group of students like that. It's not just getting a Spanish-speaking teacher and putting them in a class with. We have sometimes 3 or 4 different languages in one class, especially when on the younger levels, and so it's really training our
under
teachers.
The local control funding formula, do you need to hire more teachers that are bi or trilingual, or not necessarily? Not
necessarily. We will be hiring some more because we're rolling out some dual language immersion programs, one in Hacienda Heights, one in the Valinda corridor. But as far as for LCFF, no, we're really focusing on professional development for our staff.
So in our final moments, I wanted to ask you, you've been on the board for about a year now. You came on through appointment. How's it going?
It's been good. You get in there, you meet the staff, you meet the families, you meet the students, and it's, you're up for election.
So are you up soon?
I decided to run for a full term this November.
Okay, so you're ready to go.
That,
So how's that for you? I mean, I know that you're a staffer for a member of Congress in your day job. Now you're going to be the candidate yourself. How does that interplay?
It's a fine balance. It's a fine balance in meeting all the needs as a school board member, but as a candidate, and also working for an elected official
and as
myself.
A father,
and
who
as
has
a father.
Kid in the school district?
No, he lives primarily with his mother in another district.
Okay, and how's that work out for you?
Oh, I'm a soccer dad, so soccer games every weekend. It's a busy life.
I was going to say,
I enjoy it.
His name is Anthony Duarte. He is on the Hacienda La-Puente School Board. When we come back, we're going to be speaking with Janet Chen. She is a member of the Garvey School District. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, and our guest Janet Chen, member of the school board in Garvey, which is a K-8 school district in the San Gabriel Valley. And we just spoke with Anthony Duarte, who's in a sister school district also in the San Gabriel Valley, about Common Core. And I wanted to get a sense from you how your school district is going through the process of adopting these new standards, which are to some revolutionary.
Sure, yeah. At the end of 2011, right around 2012, we started implementing and starting doing comparisons with the 1997 state standards and the new Common Core.
And I have to interrupt you. You've got to tell me how similar or different the standards are from 1997 California to Common Core 2015, isn't it?
A lot of the standards are they're very project-based.
Right.
So they're really requiring the students to analyze and be able to write and be critical thinkers versus kind of the previous memorization and all of that. So we're finding that it's going to be a very difficult transition. We have teachers that are already doing the comparisons, and we're finding that they're confused.
I can only imagine. But I want to ask you, though, I understand that project-based learning is kind of the new it thing.
Yes.
My daughters go to a school which is project-based, and in some ways it's very inspiring. But I wonder, colleges aren't project-based. I mean, we still, when we go to college, have to take these bubbleized tests, and we have to write essays. And I'm just wondering, is Common Core too ahead of its time vis-a-vis higher education?
I don't think so. I think what we're looking at right now is that we have to align with what our workforce is going to need. We're looking at, pre-K on what colleges you're going to end up going to. So we need to really align that, K-14 education.
What about technology? Because there's no doubt, I look at my daughters and the way that they use technology for education blows my mind. I mean, I still need to write things down to remember it. They're typing. Talk to me about how technology interplays with Common Core.
Well, I don't know if you know, but there's no more cursive writing. And now everything is just keyboarding.
We're all cursive writing. So
it's not required. You don't have. Really? It's not required to teach. I mean, I'm sure that the traditional teachers are still going to maybe put that in an art class or something.
Okay, an art class, calligraphy, whatever.
But technology, really, I mean, these kids are born into it. They are used to it. This is a very fundamental part of, Well,
what about funding? iPads are expensive.
Yes.
And I know a lot of schools are looking towards iPads and other tablets. How does a public school like Garvey handle that?
On a school board level, we have to make a priority of making sure that our budgets reflect pushing more of our technology and making sure that that's available to our students.
I was talking to Anthony about English language learners, and Garvey, I understand, as well has a high number of English language learners.
Yes.
How does Common Core interplay with that element, especially since under the local control funding formula, which we'll talk about soon, there is such an emphasis in trying to bring up English language learners to proficiency.
Yes, and then I think what's going to happen is that, and a lot of this is just in transition. We're still learning it. We're still trying to make those those determinations as to where, how we're going to be helping that population of students. Our English language learners are going to continue to use that technology. We're going to push more of the kinds of programs in order to kind of fast track them.
Right.
So in some ways, I think it's a benefit to have English language learners use that.
I see.
This Common Core versus the old 1997 standards.
Our children are kind of around the same age. My eldest isn't in high school yet, but some of your younger ones kind of around the same age. And if they have been learning in a traditional way and they're kind of in this middle range, how do they all of a sudden shift to project-based learning halfway through their K-12 education? How is that going to work?
Well, one of the things in Garvey, the teachers are already getting together in their professional development to decide, how is it going to affect their teaching? How are they going to, using these aligned standards, and they're going grade level by grade level.
I see.
So right now we're in the middle of the development where we're going first through third grade. So all those teachers together are coming up with, how they're going to incorporate it into their pacing guides.
It's a remarkable process, and it's a process that is occurring with the local control funding formula in the backdrop. And I want to talk to you about that, if I may, because in addition to revolutionizing the way we teach our children, we're also revolutionizing the way we fund public education. As I mentioned with Mr. Duarte, we are getting significant bumps for school districts that educate English language learners, disadvantaged children economically, and foster care. What's your sense of the new formula? I know you have a rooting interest for it because Garvey will benefit from what's known as the concentration grant.
Absolutely.
But do talk to me about, philosophically, what you think about how we're changing the way we fund education.
One of the best things about the LCFF funding is that, like you said, it is helping the most disadvantaged students. And in public education, when we're talking about equal opportunity for all, it's really going to have a huge impact to how we're going to, you know, year to year prioritize our kind of budget.
At the same time, it does seem as if there are winners and losers. And Mr. Duarte did mention that, well, no, we go back to the base grant of 2007, 2008. But look, school districts that don't benefit from the concentration grant, that don't have a 55% plus population that are in those three categories, they're not going to get that bump. They'll get a 20% per student, and with fewer strings attached, no categoricals or very few categoricals. I mean, it seems as if those school districts that benefit from the concentration grant are rolling in it.
And it's true. I mean, we have to really see it from, you know, the perspective that really LCFF is not any new money coming in. So
is it not though? I mean, I know the total pot is the same,
right?
But you're going to get more money versus Hermosa Beach, I would presume.
Well, it's based upon, you know, again, equal opportunity, and the students who are in the most disadvantaged situations, they need the most help.
What about
philosophically?
I understand. Fair enough.
That's where we're at.
I got to ask though, and I've asked this before. I don't know if I've asked you this. A gifted bored student is a tyrant. You know that. If a gifted student is bored, that's it. They're a huge discipline problem. LCFF says nothing about gifted students. I don't think there's a categorical for gifted students anymore. So what do you do with that population? They have their own challenges.
That's where the local school board comes in and makes sure that, you know, our special needs children are
special needs on both ends.
Absolutely.
Right? On both ends.
And that's what special ed is. It's a big spectrum of children who need a different kind of education. And I think that we, as school board members, really need to focus in on that.
Because I would presume that your school board has plenty of gifted students, whether they're English language learners or not.
Absolutely.
You know, and in a lot of ways, they were preferred through categoricals, but now, not so much. We'll see.
Yeah,
I want to talk to you about politics.
Okay.
You were recently reelected to the Garvey School Board about a year ago, is that right?
In 2011.
2011, so about 2 years ago. And then because of your support of your sitting superintendent, there was a recall drive. We hear about all these recall drives popping up for a variety of reasons. The recall puttered out. They were not able to get the signatures that they needed. Talk to me about this whole process of recall and signature gathering and what you learned through it.
Well, let me first say that I'm very happy that that detour is over, that we can continue to, you know, move forward, and, you know, the fights are going to continue on, and we just hope that it doesn't affect the community in a negative way. I think, you know, having been through it now, that I can say the recall has failed, and I'm
didn't go to the voters.
It didn't go to the voters. I feel like we really need to focus. We need to stay focused on what's most important. It's not about board members or you know,
supporting one superintendent versus the other,
or even one issue over another. I think we really need to make sure that we go back to that fundamental idea of what are we here for? What is education about? What does each individual child need?
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Her name is Jenna Chen. She is a school board member at the Garvey School District. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.